Hey fam, so glad you found us. Come on in and have a seat on the couch. My name is Dr. Chris, and this is Jordan, and we are the faces of melanin culture from the couch. Take it away, Jordan.
Yes, and today we're going to dive into the entertainment world and talk a little bit about Grammys, Oscars, Emmys, things of that nature, and like how that affects us as a culture, whether we are like sometimes the winners or the losers, and what does that look like as far as like our quality of our work versus the times that we win awards versus the times that we don't.
All right, so where do you want to start, Jordan? Because there is so much to talk about on this topic.
Well, I think we could start with maybe like I don't know. You want to start like in the past, or you want to start maybe currently with like how the Grammys work?
Well, let's talk about some of the stuff in the past, right? Because that kind of is what led up to the current. I think historically, when we think about art, whether that be music, film, actual art on a canvas, or even dance, right? When we think about art, the contribution that Black people have had has always been unmatched, right? Even when we think about the world looks to African Americans, for example, for what is happening in terms of art, what is happening in music, what is happening in film, what is happening, even like when we think about TikTok, most of these trends, right? The trends that we think about, those trends start in African American culture here in America. So we as a people have always been so influential, and yet, and still, we are the least represented at the Grammys, at the Oscars, right? And you and I were kind of talking off screen about, for example, Denzel Washington. And so I want you to share a little bit about like your perspective. Please go on.
No, it's just it's interesting because I think that when you look at somebody like a Denzel, right, and his catalog of all the work he's done, and when he finally won his Oscar Training Day, right, and the role he played, it's this dirty cop, it's this gangster cop. It's like why did it take that role specifically for him to win something? Versus some of the other stuff that he's done that may have been maybe more like historic, or something that's along the lines of more positive, versus something that's kind of viewed in a negative light. So that was just kind of curious, and I think that back then when it came out, it brought a lot of things to light, and I know it was a conversation back then too, but even to this day, I think it's still a big topic.
Yeah, you're so right. And I mean, so that's when we're looking at film, right? Someone who is, again, who has been so incredibly influential in film, like Denzel Washington, an incredible actor that the only time he gets recognized is when he's playing a dirty cop. Mind you, he's played some incredible roles, right? And isn't it interesting that that's exactly the same thing that shows up in music? Right? So when we think about some of these really huge artists, so for example, and yeah, I'm about to show my age because I don't listen to this music nowadays. I just don't, right? So when I hear, for example, what's the artist name with like Ice Spice, right? With like the red hair or whatever. When I hear Ice Spice, and to think that she has this huge reach and platform. And what is she saying, Jordan? What is she talking about? You know, like poo poo. You know, like boo boo. Like what are you talking about, ma'am? Like there are incredible, amazing artists out there, and this is who we're pushing. We're pushing someone who talking about poo poo. Like, is it for real? This is for real. These are the people who are getting. It's almost sometimes it feels like what becomes mainstream and what becomes acknowledged in Black culture is like the negative stuff. And the people who are out here making positive music, the people who are out here who are creating incredible, amazing art, nobody cares. But then someone starts rapping about poo poo, and we're like, yes! Like, wait, what? What's your thoughts on that, Jordan? I feel like you just like speechless. What?
I think sometimes, I know I think with hip hop, we've always had like different like times, right? Things have kind of changed or evolved. But and like I said, I'm getting older now, so like some of the stuff that's newer or for geared towards maybe some of the younger people, I'm not as interested in. So I'm not trying to become that person, right? That's like, oh man, back
Back
in
in
my
the
day.
day.
I do feel like sometimes what is recognized or what is pushed is like watered down or kind of like simplified as far as like almost like some nursery rhyme type rap stuff sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I think I'm okay with some of it, but I really think it definitely waters down, like you said, the art. Like when we think about like we calling people artists or the art of it, and sometimes you find like it's just for like it is for entertainment, but sometimes it's like okay, who are we entertaining, right? That's how I look at it. And I think too, like I think the other side that's concerning sometimes is like who are the people that are influence what's being pushed, right? We talk about like who pushes for what's the radio shows, right? Radio spins, radio plays, and then also just even like who's behind these record labels, and who has a lot of like power. And it goes back to a lot of them don't look like the artists that you know who are actually contributing, right? So I think that's part of it too. I think that's why you kind of see that.
But it almost sometimes feels like, this is something that my partner has brought up so many times. And I'm curious about your perspective on this. If you look historically at the people who are pushed through in rap, for example, majority of these people don't come from good families, or their parents don't have a lot of money. They didn't necessarily go to school or have like much of an education. It's always usually like struggle bus people, right? People who live in the hood, people who came from the hood, people who came from violence, people who came from trauma, people who came from lack of education, people who literally had nothing to eat, right? They're literally starving artists. And it's almost like the industry preys on those people because it's almost as if those are people who are willing to sell their soul for some money and to sing or rap about foolishness, and we can get to like puppeteer them. Whereas, for example, Jordan, let's say you were a rapper, right? Like you knew how to rap. I couldn't come to you and be like, "Oh, Jordan, I'm gonna give you $1 million if you make a record about black women being ain't shit." You'd be like, "Get out of here. That's not. I'm not interested in that." Because one, you have an education, you can make money other ways, and two, like, that that's not helpful. But now if you're starving and you don't know how you're going to pay your rent next month, and I tell you I'll give you $1 million advance to make a record about black women ain't shit and talking about drugs and gang violence and gang banging and all that, you would probably take the money.
It's like you said, it's preying on that mindset of someone in a survival mode versus somebody like having some form of stability and like kind of standing on their ground.
Here's the part I feel like where it gets tricky though. Is that not the job of the industry, is to find people that they can prey on? But as the people who ingest that stuff, shouldn't is the responsibility with us to say, I'm not about to listen to that foolishness. Y'all come with something else, because if we didn't ingest it, then they couldn't make money off of it, right? It wouldn't sell, it wouldn't play. But because we ingest it, they keep selling it to us. So at what point is it our responsibility to say, hey, we don't want to hear about boo boo and poo poo, right? Like, make proper records. At what point does it become our responsibility?
I think it's always been our responsibility, but I want to shift gears a little bit too, but it's kind of funny. I'm not sure if you've kind of seen, but it's almost like even with the whole like Super Bowl halftime performance debate with Kendrick, right? With Kendrick Lamar. Um, I've seen
What
mixed
do you mean?
feelings.
Say more.
So I so I've seen where people have been like, yeah, I loved it, love the message behind it, love the creativity. But then I've seen like, man, I was bored. Oh, they should have did it this way, should have done it that way, this and that. And I've also seen the angle of like, well, he could have done some of his different songs. Like he did, he went at Drake again. So so I think we're in a space where like people are always like divided. It's very rare. There's some topics I feel like where people are kind of like all in on. Like I mean there are, but like when it comes to stuff like this, it's always like that debate, like that 50-50 almost, where it's just like, well, do I want to be entertained or do I want to be educated? Do I want to think or do I just want to have fun?
You're right. And how do you please all the people? Well, you don't, right? I don't know. I think that that's a tough one. I think no matter what way you go, the art will never please all the people because I don't know that the art isn't created for everybody.
And I think that I'm not gonna sit here and act like I just listen to just so in depth music, right? There's times where I listen to stuff that could be considered trap music or just like thoughtless or senseless music. But then also I like motivational, motivating music too. So or like kind of calm like old school jazzy samples on the hip hop beat, like that type of stuff too. So I have a good balance of what I listen to. But, I don't listen to the radio because I know the radio will always swing typically towards entertainment or towards like the beef and the drama. And they kind of like, they pick their few little songs or whatever and they force it down your throats pretty much. But, I think that's why we still have, like you said, the freedom of choice to kind of choose what we want to listen to, what we want to digest to.
I mean, do you think it also changed for you? Because I feel like for me, once I had kids, especially because I have girls, my taste in music changed a lot, right? Like in the past, I when I was younger, I was listening to Drake all the time, right? I was listening to like Notorious B.I.G. was one of my favorites, right? I would listen to so many different hip hop artists that I love. But as I've gotten older, and now that I'm a mom and I have two little girls, I can't even listen to that stuff the same, right? Like it literally makes me cringe because I'm like, ugh, like the way that some of these songs talk about women, the way that it's just so disrespectful. And yeah, sure, when I was younger and I was I was in the club, I was living it up at Live on Sundays. It worked, right? But now that I'm a mom, it makes me, I feel disrespected. I can't even ingest that music the same way. Do you feel like it's changed for you becoming a dad and being a girl dad?
I'll say yes to a certain extent. Like I said, I think for me, certain music is just like it depends on music is about like mood for me, right? So now I feel like I'm in a space now where it's more so like goal oriented, like get to the money, like stay grinding. That's the kind of music I listen to now, right? I still don't listen to it around my kids just because it's the language in general, but that's kind of like the biggest shift for me. But some of the older, like some of the ratchet stuff, I listen to some of that stuff. I don't. I'll put it like this, and this is just my personal opinion. I don't care for some of the newer stuff, like some of the newer like female rap stuff, just in general. Just because I feel like sometimes it's a little, like you said, you got two young girls. Some of the stuff just seems kind of ratchet. Even some of the stuff now with like the guy stuff, like with a lot of like promoting like drugs usage and things like that. Like because we see like what's happening with that culture. Especially when we're working in those populations. Sometimes you see like these kids overdosing or becoming like almost like zombies with trying to keep up with that culture. So like that stuff I tend to shy away from a little bit more. But yeah, I think to answer your question, yes, my tastes have changed somewhat for sure.
Yes, right? And but I think you're right. I think it depends on the mood, right? And because even for me and growing up, I listened a lot to American music, but also to my parents being from Jamaica, plenty of reggae and dance hall. And even that, like I can't listen to Vibes Cartel the same because it's so, oh my gosh, if I hear one more thing about Pum Pum, like I can't, like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. I can't do it. Whereas back in the day, I just loved me some vibes. But it's so interesting how as you get older, there's some things that you still appreciate, but your taste kind of changes with your mood, right? Where do you think, and again, going back to our responsibility as Black people, and where do you think the responsibility lies, Jordan, with us about what we choose to ingest and how we show up in the art?
I think it's important. I think you should always like somewhat like do your research or be aware of how things affect you too. When I'm working with like younger people, like in the profession, I always talk to them about music and how it affects your mood. Like I know that a lot of young kids or even young adults even could be big fans of like Rod Wave and some of those similar artists, like even the guy that rest in peace was his name, Juice World. Those type of artists were like a lot of their music was centered around somewhat like drug usage or like
Mm-hmm.
trauma, right? And just for the sake of just trying to be in tune with the culture and understand where these kids are coming from, I listen to some of the music. Some of it's okay, in my opinion, and some of it is very like, just lack of a better term, just very depressing at times. And I find myself like, I couldn't listen to this all the time. Like I just couldn't. But a lot of our young people are consuming just that, right? And I always want them like, look, if you're already somewhat in a bad space or in a dealing with difficult times, some of the stuff can be relatable, yes. But how much of this do you want to consume? Like, how much of this do you want to take on? And think about how it's affecting you after you listen to it.
You're so right. I mean, there's literally studies out there, right? Actual research papers written on how music actually affects your mood. So, for example, and believe it or not, we aren't always aware, but even the way in which these music companies are selecting the musical vibrations of the music are directly impacting our brain function. And I know people might be like, what are you talking about? No, it's not. Go look it up, right? Like, go and look it up. So, for example, for me, I noticed when I was younger, there was this one particular reggae artist that I love. And his name is Sizzla Kalonji, right? But anytime I listen to Sizzla's music, I want to fight somebody, right?
Mm.
Because he's like a revolutionary, or back then he used to be. And there's this particular song that I would listen to, and it says like, I was born in a system who doesn't give a fuck about you nor me nor the life of our kids. I keep my guns loaded just in case things get frig, because we never know like when the
Mm.
system, right? And so as a kid, I'm like singing this song and I would get so hyped, and then I realized like I got angry. I would get angry about the system when I would listen to this song, not
Right.
realizing that like this music is doing something to our mind, to our heart, to our spirit, right? So yeah, you have to be so careful about what it is that you are allowing into your I think of it this way as I get older. The same way that we are mindful about what ingredients are in our food because we're ingesting it, we also have to be mindful about what we are allowing our brain and our bodies to be exposed to, because that also affects our spirit. I feel like we could continue on this topic forever, Jordan, because this is a good one.
For sure, for sure. It's more layers to it, like we kind of been touching on. So
So, to all of you guys out there, thank you so much for tuning in to Melanin Culture from the Couch. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue. So, if you guys have anything to say about art, the music, right, and all of these different topics that we talked about today, please like, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. We are so looking forward to continuing the conversation about us and Black culture. Peace, love, and melanin.
peace.